Jesus.
Kid-ermission, Kid-ermission.
It's time for the Bible.
Kid-ermission, Kid-ermission.
So come on close. Oh yeah. Here we go. It's Kid-ermission time.
Hey, my name's Elsa. I'm going to get this microphone figured out. But I got to use my hands, so can't have it too close or I'm going to make a mess. I am one of the Faith Kids directors here at Cheney Faith Center, and I'm really glad to be here, even though I'm really out of breath from trying to find a microphone. That's must mean I need to do some more running around on a regular basis. Hey, earlier Pastor Mark said that we're going to have a Candy Corner Carnival this weekend, and I'm super excited about it. It is something that I've been working on, and our staff here has been working on, some volunteers have been working on. So if you're at home, kiddos, just look at your grown-up right now and say, hey, let's go get some candy on Halloween at church. And if you're in this room and you don't have kiddos, then come talk to me afterwards, and you can love on the kiddos in our community. And if you're in this room with your kiddos, please bring them. So kids, if you have not gotten one of these new journals, please give me a shout out on social media, call me, email me, text me. You can also get a hold of anyone here at church, and we will get you one. We would love to bring it by to you or put it in the mail for you. And if you're here, you can pop back to the back and grab one. Also, if you know a kid who would like one of these journals, we'd love to share. So in your journal, please turn. We're on the first week again of this journal. We're in chapter 11, and we are going to talk about 1 Corinthians chapter 11, and we're going to talk a little bit about our memory verse. And I'm going to read our memory verse because I don't have it memorized yet. It is, for every time you eat this bread and drink this cup, you are announcing the Lord's death until he comes again. And that's 1 Corinthians 11:26. And it's sort of a little bit funny when you think about eating bread and drinking from a cup that you would be announcing the Lord's death. Because you and I, we eat food and drink from cups all the time. And we eat bread, sometimes peanut butter and jelly, sometimes just plain, and we aren't announcing the Lord's death every time. But there's a special meal that we call communion, and that's just a big fancy word for bread and juice or wine that we have that does announce the Lord's death until he comes again. And you're probably thinking, why in the world do I want to announce the Lord's death? That's like kind of sad news, you know. I don't need to be announcing that all the time because I'm going to just be walking around sad. Well, there's two reasons for it. The first reason is Jesus' death is not sad. And the second reason is because Jesus tells us to. So, first, Jesus' death is not sad because while he did die on the cross, he didn't stay dead on the cross, right? That the cross is also a symbol of hope for us because it didn't hold Jesus to it. Jesus died on it, but he came back to life, and that was not the end of Jesus. But the second reason is because Jesus told us to drink from this cup and eat from this bread right before he died on this cross. He was having dinner with his disciples, and remember, his disciples were his 12 best friends. And they were celebrating that they had, many years ago, their ancestors had been freed from slavery to the evil king Pharaoh. And they were celebrating it at a meal called Passover. And Jesus told them, this is my body. And he took some of the bread, and it was probably this kind of bread, which isn't really very good. But it was then, because they didn't have delicious French bread. They had this flat, unleavened bread. And the reason why they used this is because it was another symbol to remind them that they were free from the slavery of the evil king. And so he said, this is my body, and it's broken for you. And probably his disciples at the time thought, what? your body is fine. But they knew that they were celebrating their freedom with Jesus, and so they ate some with him. Just a little bit because, there were 12 of them, and this isn't a lot of bread, so I just had a little bit. And then he passed around this cup, and he said, this cup is a new covenant in my blood. And when they heard that, they knew what the word covenant meant, but you and I might hear it and not know. And covenant is a big word for a promise or an agreement between God and his people. And so Jesus says this cup of wine or juice is a new agreement, a new promise between God and his people. And so he passed around, and they all took a little sip, and swallowed it properly so they didn't choke. And then and then they did that, and then you will remember all of the events of Easter. Well, where Jesus died on the cross and then came back to life, and the sadness of his death became not so sad. That's what you'll remember. And so God told his people to do this in remembrance of me. Well, then we get all the way to the Corinthians, which isn't that much farther from when Jesus did it the first time. And the Corinthians were not doing it like Jesus said. In fact, they were being very unkind to one another, and they would come and they would eat, and they would just Cookie Monster it. And they would splash it everywhere. And they made a big old mess. And they ate, and they didn't share it with their friends. And they certainly didn't use their manners. And it was really hard to do, you guys. But, they were not taking and acknowledging the holiness and the significance of that agreement. And not only were they making a mess, because if we forget to use our manners, that's not that big of a deal. But when our heart disregards it, not just our actions disregard the significance of taking Jesus' body and blood and acknowledging the agreement that was made with God, that was the sin of the Corinthians. And that was why Paul had to write them and say, every time you eat this bread and drink this cup, you are announcing the Lord's death. It is much more significant than just feeding your body. It is a reminder that you live in a new agreement with God. So you have a little activity on your memory verse to help you practice and remember it. And you take these little tabs and you cover up each word. And as you practice, you can lift it and learn each word. And then eventually you won't have to lift any of them, and you'll be able to know how to do your memory verse from heart. And you also have a challenge this week, kids, to take communion with your family, not just today, but also another time, and to talk through what the significance is of Jesus' body and his blood being sacrificed on the cross.